Hey, babe. Ooh, another week. First off, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. Thanks for everything you do. If you're getting these kids out fishing, being good role models, you know, it's awesome. It's hard work. Thank you so much. Well, happy Father's Day to all the dads. So this last week, we've had some interesting conditions. Some things have changed. There's been some consistencies. I'll tell you what, if you don't like the wind and the rain and the cold, this year you probably haven't had a lot of fun on the boat, because I feel like we've been out in the wind and the rain more than anything. So we've seen some things this past week. For the bluegill anglers out there, the bite's been good. They're spawning, they're on the beds. Some are coming off the beds, but still plenty of them up there in the colonies. One thing I really want to hammer home on is letting those big fish go, selective harvest. If you're on social media this week, you've seen some articles surfacing about letting big bluegills go. It's very important to preserve the fishery so that young gals like this and boys can get out there and catch these fish later on, especially in the metro when the bite's tough. There's not a lot of big fish to begin with, so if you're fishing these big sunfish, let them go to grow. Sounds cliche, but it's super important to preserve these fisheries. So speaking of sunfish, we found a really cool pattern this last week for the big bass in the metro. They're relating to the colonies, those shallow colonies where the bluegills are spawning. Now, I'm not saying 1 feet, 2 feet back dirty water bays where these bluegills are spawning. I'm talking main lake structure, main lake flats, humps, points, where the bluegills are on the deepest side of the colony. You may see bluegill beds up in a foot or two of water, out to 6, 7 feet of water. They're out there in that 5, 6, 7 foot range where you see those bluegill beds. Those big bass are sitting there, and you have to fish slow. Too many anglers, I think, are fishing way too fast for these fish, and they're not catching them. These big female largemouth are post-spawn, and they're sitting down on these deep bluegill beds, chasing things around. If you fish quick and you fish shallower, you might still get bit, but you're catching the males, the 12 to 15 inchers. You want those big fish, those 3-pounders, those 4-pounders. They're going to be deeper. They're going to be fishing shallow or slower. So give that a shot. If that's a pattern for you, it's probably going to move on here pretty quick, that pattern, as these bluegills start to move off beds. But at least for me this week, we caught a lot of fish targeting bass that way. Wacky rigs, dead sticking almost, that sort of stuff to get these fish to bite. Small finesse jigs, the finesse jig from All-Terrain, caught a lot of fish for us this week. Talking about wind. The wind has been a nemesis to us these past couple weeks. Like I said, if you don't like wind, you probably have been miserable in the boat. We were out there yesterday and it was blowing 20 miles an hour. We had white caps across the lake and we had to adapt. Use the wind to your advantage. If you're gonna fish a certain stretch, get upwind, drift down. You don't need to have your foot in the trolling motor all the time to stay on a spot. If you find fish, great, and you happen to stay on them, cool. But use the wind to your advantage, and then fan cast. There's some things you can do to play in the wind, because you know what? Some days you have to be in the wind to catch the big fish. So get used to fishing in the wind. One bait that's done really well for us this past week, been fishing the AT jig from All-Terrain. A lot of guys and gals fish this jig, catch a lot of fish, but we've been increasing the size to 3/8 or ½ ounce. I can cast it better in the wind. It can stay down better in the wind. I can keep it across the bottom of the lake and keep contact of where those fish are. I've been crawling this bait, main lake structure, to catch big bass. I put a bigger profile plastic like that Buzz Bug from Mr. Twister, and I've been fishing it. Rattle, heavier bait, good contact with the ground, easy to fish in windy conditions. It's worked exceptionally well. So the AT jig from All-Terrain, give it a shot if you haven't already. It'll catch some fish this time of year, especially in windy conditions. Speaking of which, sometimes you have to go lighter this time of year, mainly because the fish in the wind or the weeds, you have fish higher in the water column. The weeds are growing higher in the water column. So if you fish a heavier bait, especially around the weeds, it's gonna dive deep. So the anglers that wanna fish chatterbaits, spinnerbaits, crankbaits, all that kind of stuff, I've gone to a little lighter presentation. So when it comes to chatterbaits, I've switched to a lighter weight bait. I can ride higher in the water column. I'm not buried in the weeds. A lot of my clients are using them on spinning rods, which is perfectly fine. And you can cast it out there, stay higher in the water column and not dive into the weeds. So I've had better success throwing lighter chatterbaits than I did, let's say, a week or so ago, because I'm not trying to get as deep. I'm trying to fish over the top of the weeds, get a reaction strike. So the bass bite's been pretty good. Jack crushed a couple nice fish around the pencil reeds and around the docks the last couple days. So the wacky rig bite's still going. So if you're out bass fishing, you're probably having fun. Post-spawn transition, I would expect in another week or so, a lot of things are gonna be deep. Pike fishing, they're moving out of the shallows. You're not catching as many pike shallow. Weed line fishermen are catching more pike now. It seems to be more consistent. Same goes with the walleyes. Walleyes, pike, weed line fishing, you've been catching them pulling light crankbaits, fishing jig and minnow, that sort of stuff, sun up, sundown for the walleyes. The muskies are cruising all over the shallows. You can see them. They're chomping on stuff. We haven't fished for them much, but they're there. I'm seeing muskie anglers when I get out there in the mornings when the sun's coming up, chasing down fish, and especially the last few hours of light and after dark. So there's some good fish to be had. We're going to get out there and chase them again this week. But like I said, if you have to fish in the wind, don't be scared to. Think of some ways to use it to your advantage and get out there and chase fish in these windy conditions. The bluegills are still snapping. The crappies are in the weeds or on the weed line, so plenty of opportunity. Mid-June can bring great weather and great fishing. So if you get out there, chase some fish, have some fun. You gonna catch some more fish? All right. Low 70-degree water temp, 70 to 72. What's that? Oh, she wants to catch a shark. We may have a hard time catching a shark here in the metro, but you know, we won't tell her. She can keep casting for sharks. So low 70-degree water temp. The bite should be good this next week. Looks like we're gonna have some stable weather in the 70s, maybe some rain and clouds on and off. I expect to have a similar report for you next week, and we may try to catch some fish a little deeper. What's that, hon? Yeah, go ahead, tell them something.
So, when Grandma gets here, we're eating spaghetti.
We're gonna have spaghetti when Grandma and Grandma get here for Father's Day. So get out there, have some fun, catch some fish, have